Hello there, little masters, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, well, the good stuff might bring you luck of an unusual kind, if it doesn't make you as drowsy as a drunken wood elf first.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the heave-ho to my splash plump. Did I ever mention how hard these intro gags are? Alan Sisto.
Did you just call me heave-ho?
I did, yeah.
Is that... Yeah,
I called myself Splash Plump, so I think
true.
both of those are just insulting to anybody.
They really are. They're really like worse than Tom Noddy.
Yeah, they really are.
Thank you, Shawn. Folks, tonight we finish up Chapter 9 of The Hobbit, Barrels Out of Bond. Now, we promised to do so because we weren't really upfront with you last time about stopping halfway through.
No, that was on me. Alan asked me to make sure we put a note about it in the intro, but I forgot because apparently I was too busy racking my brain to come up with more blank to my blank gags.
Well, you could always let me come up with them, but you might end up as the Alfred to my master next time. So,
we don't want to do that one.
No. Folks, if you haven't listened to our last episode, 72 yet, please do that. I don't know really if there's anybody out there listening out of order, but in case you are, there's our recommendation. For the rest of you, why don't we get started?
All right, let's do that. And we'll start with a new installment of This Week in Tolkien History.
Except we're actually doing something special with this one, aren't we?
Yes, we are. For the first time ever, and probably the last, we're going to do This Week in Middle-earth History. Folks, this episode releases on March 11th, and there are so many things happening this week during the year of the War of the Ring. We just felt like we had to commemorate them. So, Alan, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
I think I will. Today, March 11th, in the year 3019 of the Third Age, is the day that Gollum almost decided not to betray Frodo and Sam to Shelob.
Almost.
The date's given to us in Appendix B. I know, almost. I came this close. The date's given to us for this, for March 11, 3019, in Appendix B for The Lord of the Rings. The incident is recounted in Book 4, Chapter 8, The Stairs of Cirith Ungol, and I'll read that briefly. Gollum returned from sneaking off and found Frodo sleeping in Sam's lap. Then Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and gray, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head, as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously, he touched Frodo's knee. But almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth, an old, starved, pitiable thing.
Well, it's a beautiful moment. Then, of course, Sam woke up and saw Gollum pawing at his master and snapped at him. And then that was pretty much the last time Gollum ever even considered, doing a nice thing.
Yeah, well, the past history.
Yeah.
You got to pay a price sometimes.
Exactly. Well, the next one that we wanted to celebrate this week is March 13th, the same day that an unconscious Frodo was captured by Gorbag and Shagrat in Cirith Ungol. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli reached Pelargir and captured the ships of the Corsairs of Umbar. Gimli describes that scene in Book 5, Chapter 9, The Last Debate. He said, Aragorn halted and cried with a great voice, "Now come! By the black stone I call you!" And suddenly the shadow host that had hung back at the last came up like a gray tide, sweeping all away before it. Faint cries I heard, and dim horns blowing, and a murmur as of countless far voices. It was like the echo of some forgotten battle in the dark years long ago. Pale swords were drawn, but I know not whether their blades would still bite, for the dead needed no longer any weapon but fear. None would withstand them. To every ship they came that was drawn up, and then they passed over the water to those that were anchored. And all the mariners were filled with a madness of terror and leaped overboard, save the slaves chained to the oars. Reckless we rowed among our fleeing foes, driving them like leaves, until we came to the shore. And then to each of the great ships that remained Aragorn sent one of the Dunedain, and they comforted the captives that were aboard, and bade them put aside fear and be free.
Man, what a description.
That's
boy, I can't wait till we get to all that.
Such an exciting scene. It's going to be a
that'll
long time,
be a while.
but yeah, it'll be awesome when we do.
About 3 years, I'm guessing. But,
yeah. The temptation to read every single passage.
Every passage, I know.
It's going to be very, very hard.
Yeah,
we can't.
We might have to seek special permission to in terms of copyright issues. So on March 14th, Sam found Frodo in the Tower of Cirith Ungol. And this is from Book 6, Chapter 1, The Tower of Cirith Ungol. With a cry, Sam leapt across the floor, sting in hand. The orc wheeled round... Sorry, sting in hand again. Ever since we started talking about Gordon Sumner, it's still funny.
You just see him smiling in Sam's hand, like, "Hey, it's me."
That's right. Sting. And everybody fears me. An irrational fear of Sting. All right. With a cry, Sam leaped across the floor. I'm sorry. Let me try that a third time. With a cry, Sam leapt across the floor, sting in hand. The orc wheeled round, but before it could make a move, Sam slashed its whip hand from its arm. Howling with pain and fear, but desperate, the orc charged head down at him. Sam's next blow went wide, and thrown off his balance, he fell backwards, clutching at the orc as it stumbled over him. Before he could scramble up, he heard a cry and a thud. The orc, in its wild haste, had tripped on the ladder head and fallen through the open trap door. Sam gave no more thought to it. He ran to the figure huddled on the floor. It was Frodo.
Oh, man. Such a great moment.
What a moment.
Such a fantastic moment. Sam's hero moment.
And that was right after that cool moment where he was singing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's right. And then, of course, on the morning of March 15th, a cock crowed. Shrill and clear he crowed, recking nothing of wizardry or war, welcoming only the morning that in the sky far above the shadows of death was coming with the dawn. And as if in answer there came from far away another note. Horns, horns, horns. In dark Mindalluin's side they dimly echoed. Great horns of the north wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last.
You'll forgive me for, I practically had that passage memorized, so.
Of course, as well you should. There is so much more that I would love to read from March 15th.
Oh, yeah.
Right up to and including a certain begone foul Dwimmerlike, Lord of Carrion.
Yeah.
Folks, first of all, my co-host would be really annoyed if I stole any more of the Ride of the Rohirrim from him.
Yeah.
And I suppose we should probably get back to The Hobbit at some point today.
Well, that is what we're covering in Season 2. Most annoyed, by the way, would not suffice. It might well be your former co-host if you stole Theoden's ride from me.
I know you well.
It's like me taking Eärendil's stuff. I know better.
Yeah.
I know better.
Yeah.
But you're right.
That's right. We'll share the Pelennor fields. You'll get the Theoden stuff. I'll get
Fair
the
enough.
Eowyn stuff. We'll all be happy.
Fair enough. We'll deal with that in 3 years. In the meantime, though, like you said, we should probably talk about The Hobbit at some point, and this is as good a time as any.
It is, but before we start, I do have one little correction to
amendment?
make.
Yeah.
An amendment. A revision, if you will.
An addendum.
There you go, yeah. A few episodes ago, this was episode 68, we were talking about some of the great bears throughout Tolkien's work, and I brought up Paksu and Valkatuka from the Father Christmas Letters. I somehow botched that reference, and I called them the cousins of Karhu, the North Polar Bear. Now, it took a few weeks for somebody to spot my error, but Cardinal Doomsday, our most ominously named listener on YouTube, pointed out just a few days ago that Paksu and Valkatuka were actually North Polar Bear's nephews, not his cousins.
That's right.
Now, okay, in my defense, even Bilbo Baggins has a little trouble with the difference between a nephew and a cousin. Remember?
That's true. He calls
his cousin
nephew.
Frodo my heir and nephew. But no, Cardinal D is absolutely right. My mistake, folks. Paksu and Valkatuka, the nephews of the North Polar
Not
Bear.
the cousins. That's right. Your mistake, folks. Just want to make sure we know.
My mistake. This time,
because I make plenty of them. Plenty of them.
Yes.
In fact,
Yes,
I should
you do,
mention.
and
I should mention one. I didn't even put it in our notes, but you know how a while back, and I'm talking, it was probably 5 or 6 episodes ago, we were talking about. We'd had a question from Mick, I think, on Shadowfax being, why was he white in the movies?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And, we talked about how the color issue was a question about whether the white horse I don't remember what the question was, but the whole thing is we were wrong about the horse thing. It turns out that a gray horse becomes white with age. And you can tell that they're a gray horse because their skin is black. So you can see that like in his eyes, around his eye sockets and his nose. You can see the black skin.
Oh, wow.
And that they're born gray and that they kind of white out, so to speak. But that a truly white horse would actually be an albino with pink skin. So he's not a white horse in the films. He was a gray horse, just one that had turned white.
Wow, that's very interesting. I
We'll
remember
thank Debbie B. from Texas for that one, by the way.
Yes, that's where I saw that. Thank you for that, Debbie.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I now know more about horses than I did before.
Well, she is our resident equine expert, so...
Well, and then that allows, because I always wondered, because, we talked about Shadowfax. The name means, I can't remember exactly, but it means something like, shadowy gray coat or something like that. But so he was a gray horse.
He was a gray horse in the films.
As he got older, he must have turned white.
Yep. So I blew it. I thought there was a mistake in the films because, me, I'm always looking for mistakes in the films.
Well, I was right there with you. I think I was, I was looking at the word, the Old English word, and thinking that there was an issue there. But
exactly.
But, yeah, very cool. Well, thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Cardinal Doomsday.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get into the discussion. We're not too far behind schedule. So we'll pick up exactly where we left off. When we left off, Bilbo had been thinking about the Watergate. That would be the gate in the water, not the apartment complex in Washington,
not
D.C.
the apartment complex in Washington.
Nor the political scandal in 1972, was it?
No.
Yeah, no. So he'd been trying to figure things out, and the king's butler had taken the chief of the guards downstairs and said, "Hey, let me show you what I got." So when he heard this, Bilbo was all in a flutter, for he saw that luck was with him, and he had a chance at once to try his desperate plan. He followed the two elves until they entered a small cellar and sat down at a table on which two large flagons were set. Soon they began to drink and laugh merrily. Luck of an unusual kind was with Bilbo then. It must be potent wine to make a wood elf drowsy, but this wine, it would seem, was the heady vintage of the great gardens of Dorwinion, not meant for his soldiers or his servants, but for the king's feasts only, and for smaller bowls, not for the butler's great flagons.
I'm sorry. The good stuff, not meant for the soldiers and the servants.
That's right. This isn't the boxed wine. This is the good stuff.
No, this is the king's private stash.
Yeah. And it's supposed to be served in, smaller bowls instead of these massive,
these big goblets, flagons.
I was reading, just as an aside, that I guess the average wine glass these days is about 6 times as large as it was about 200 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. Interesting. So
that is interesting.
Those of you who drink are consuming more wine than used to be done. So anyway, there you have it.
I'm certainly drinking more wine than I was when I was younger.
Well, yeah, I'm sure this show has nothing to do with that.
No, not at all. No, talking to you every 2 weeks or a week.
Every week, yeah.
Whatever it is now.
I know, whatever it is.
Whatever it is
More
now.
than that with the postscripts, but all right.
Yeah.
We shall return to the text. So very soon, the chief guard blew a .10 and nodded his head. Sorry. I will try to refrain from actually adding to the text. Let me not do that. Very soon, the chief guard nodded his head. Then he laid it on the table and fell fast asleep. The butler went on talking and laughing to himself for a while without seeming to notice, but soon his head too nodded to the table, and he fell asleep and snored beside his friend. Then in crept the Hobbit. Very soon the chief guard had no keys, but Bilbo was trotting as fast as he could along the passages towards the cells. The great bunch seemed very heavy to his arms, and his heart was often in his mouth, in spite of his ring, for he could not prevent the keys from making every now and then a loud clink and clank, which put him all in a tremble. First he unlocked Balin's door, and locked it again carefully as soon as the dwarf was outside. Balin was most surprised, as you can imagine, but glad as he was to get out of his wearisome little stone room, he wanted to stop and ask questions, and know what Bilbo was going to do, and all about it. Because apparently that's what dwarves do. They want to know the plan.
They have to know the plan.
They do have to know the plan.
I got to say, I don't often drink too much wine and fall asleep. But next time I do, and I lose my keys, I'm blaming the Invisible
Bilbo,
Hobbit.
Yeah, Mr. Invisible Baggins, definitely blame him.
Well, what did you do with your keys, honey? I don't know. Invisible Hobbit must have got them.
That's right.
Mr. Invisible Baggins again.
That's a great excuse. I like
It
that.
is. It's a good excuse for lots of things.
Yeah. I as many times as I've read this, and
I'm sorry, officer. I couldn't help speeding. There was an invisible hobbit on the gas pedal.
I couldn't, oddly, I did not notice until literally reading out loud, again, pointing that out, that the butler's just totally doesn't even care that the chief guard's asleep. He's just like,
He's just talking away.
that
for who
Thranduil's
knows how
hair,
long.
man. I got to get some of that
Yeah.
conditioner. He's laughing.
He's just going on and on, man. Just carrying on.
You've never known anybody at the bar to do that, right? To just be talking to
No.
themselves. Never,
No,
never, ever seen that.
Never, ever
Ever
seen anything
happens.
like that. That's great.
That is really funny. That is really, really
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. It's a blink and you miss it kind of
really
moment,
is.
but
It's
it's
another-
so funny when you stop on the image of it.
Yeah, A falls asleep, and then B falls asleep, but not right
He's
away.
just
You've
like-
got this little
Yeah,
bit
he's
here that he goes on talking and laughing.
For who knows how long.
Oh, man. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Luck of an unusual kind was with Bilbo. See, now
I like that.
we're talking about unusual luck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's very significant that he's got unusual luck.
Mm-hmm.
And now's when it's important, isn't it? You know, this is a one chance kind of deal.
It really is,
And,
yeah. I mean, who knows when you'll get another chance
Yeah.
to pack
Yeah.
the dwarves into barrels and
Right.
because that's got to be, that's fun. That's
To
fun
get the
stuff.
I mean, it's like it is truly. Yeah,
It could be months
just
before the next,
the series of events
yes,
that had to line up for
exactly.
this heist to take place,
And the timing,
it's
because if it
incredible.
was another, let's say, 3 months before the next festival, well, sure, you might get out then, but you wouldn't have been at the gate or at the door in time for Durin's Day. Not
Right.
a chance. So,
Right. Now, we talked about the potency
Yes.
of the wine.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and the fact that it was made for much smaller glasses,
yeah.
probably
Shot glasses rather than tumblers. You know.
medieval-sized wine glasses as opposed to
the kinds you get at the
the
restaurants. these days.
monstrosities that I have in my cupboard.
They're pint glasses, but just with a rounded bottom and a stem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I have some 8 ounces in my collection. I don't fill them.
No, of course not.
Can't fill them. I could not possibly do that much wine. But I'm not an elven butler.
No, you're not. Speaking of Butler, you told me you were going to do some word nerdery on that, didn't you?
I did, and I managed to do that. It struck me. I might have said this in the last episode that just the word butler strikes me as a very modern word.
Yeah, it did seem
You know,
almost like an
used in a story like
anachronistic
this.
use of that, didn't it?
Yeah, it almost seems like a Victorian word or something
Yes,
like that.
yes.
But I looked into it, and I learned that butler actually has been in English since the 13th century.
Oh, wow. Longer than I
This is
thought.
very interesting. Much longer than I thought. It has changed meaning over time. It originally came from French, and I may butcher this. I hope my high school
Oh,
French
my
teacher's
French
not
is terrible.
listening. I mean, I took years of it, but it's been a long time. So it comes from French bouteiller, which comes from the French bouteille, which means bottle. And so it was originally the chief servant in charge of the wine. It means like, the bottle guy.
Oh, wow.
It gradually evolved to mean, what we use it as today, the head servant of the household. But originally it did just mean the servant who's in charge of the wine. And so I think, what we see here is Tolkien's actually taking it back to its original medieval meaning. Which is really fascinating. I had no idea of the history of this word until now.
That's fascinating. What's the word I'm thinking of
Now, this
now
guy's-
that relates to that? Like when you go to a fancy restaurant and you've got the guy with
Well, a
the...
restaurant usually has a sommelier.
That's it, sommelier.
Yeah,
Sommelier.
they're like the people, the one who picks the wine.
Not the
and they can,
sommelier.
recommend.
Not a sommelier. If you call him a sommelier,
No,
you're not
this-
going to get to stay in the restaurant. You have to leave.
No, not at all.
You have to
And I
leave,
probably
sir.
am saying that a little bit wrong too. I think it's more like sommelier or
Sommelier.
sommelier, something like that.
Sommelier.
Yeah.
Well, and we also talked about how unusual it was last episode to see elves drinking wine, that they usually drank mead instead. And we brought up several examples. We talked about them having some experience with being drunk. There was that line about how they were besotted as if with wine to have followed Feanor.
Oh, right.
The
Yeah.
line that
they
Angrod, wasn't it?
Angrod said to
To
was a thing
to
called Thingol
Thingol. Yeah. And then we had that really awesome bit about Cyros from the Lay of the Children of Hurin.
Yeah.
Well, guess
Yes.
what? I love that so much that we're going back to the Lay of the Children of Hurin to hear about this particular
awesome. Okay.
wine. So in the version of the tale that we read last time, Bela gives Turin and his companions this same wine, and here's what it says. Their heads were mazed by the wine of Dorwinion that went in their veins, and they soundly slept. And it keeps going, but that's the little bit.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right. And actually,
powerful stuff right there. We get the total image of the potency, don't we?
It is, because I mean, Beleg and Turin were not small guys.
No. And I mean, Beleg's an elf. You'd think he could drink Turin under the table, but they're both.
You would think.
Yeah.
They're both sleeping soundly.
Yes.
Well, and a few lines earlier, we get a little bit about the production of the wine.
Yeah.
We learn that it is bruised from the berries of the burning south, and the gnome folk know it, and the nation of the elves, and by long ways lead it to the lands of the north.
The gnome folk being the Noldor, just as a reminder.
The gnome folk being the Noldor, because this would have been back in back in Beleriand.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting? Rateliff points this out. He has a little essay on the topic in the history of the Hobbit. He points out that these are really the only two incidents of elves getting drunk in all of Tolkien's work. We get the Cyros, or Orgoth as he was called at the time, and then the butler and guard in the Elven King's halls.
Right.
And as he says, it can hardly be an accident that the same wine was involved in both cases. So I guess we know now why elves are usually just social drinkers. It takes really strong stuff.
It has to be really strong stuff. It's only special wine.
Very special wine to get them drunk. And we learned that the strongest wine comes from Dorwinion, a place we don't really know a whole lot about.
No, we don't. I mean, we get that hint in the line that I just read, that
south.
it comes from the south. I mean, most of what we do know about its location actually comes from a linguistic essay that was published in one of the linguistic journals, Parma Eldelamberon, which is one of the linguistic journals that's very hard to get.
Yeah.
Because most of the issues are actually out of print now. But
hard to find any of them.
It's hard to find any of them. Occasionally you'll get a little, quote here and there online that somebody's shared. And that's usually about the best you can do, unless you
have the copies.
Have the copies or, order the few copies that are available. But
at some crazy price, I'm sure.
The ones that are available
are so expensive.
Yeah, and then the ones that are available are like, maybe $30 each.
That's not terrible.
The ones that are unavailable. The ones that are unavailable, I can't even find them on eBay or anything.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But issue 17 of that journal had a linguistic essay that was actually Tolkien's own essay. It's called Words, Phrases, and Passages in Lord of the Rings. And in that one, Tolkien says about Dorwinion, he says, "It was probably far south down the river running, and its Sindarin name a testimony to the spread of Sindarin. In this case, expectable, since the cultivation of vines was not known originally to the Nandor or Avari."
Oh, okay. Well, so if you look all the way to the east on the map of Middle-earth in your Lord of the Rings book, or maybe on loaderproject.com, and you imagine that it's somewhere far down on the river running, the Kelduin, which flows to the Sea of Rhûn. Or, check this out, you can actually look at a map where Dorwinion is actually shown.
I was so glad you found that. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I dug and dug and dug, and I found this. It's actually on Pauline Bain's map of Middle-earth, which she created in 1969. So it was published in 1970. I don't know how it didn't hit my radar before, but you might recall that this excitement a couple years back about an annotated map, Tolkien annotated map of Middle-earth that was found in a book. After she passed away. Well, Baines had ripped out the old map from one of her Lord of the Rings books, and Tolkien himself created annotations for her to use in creating the new map. So on this annotated map, and thus on Baines' new map, Tolkien wrote Dorwinion and pointed to a spot near the northwest corner of the Sea of Rhûn. It's really cool to see that it's there.
That's awesome.
We'll put the images
in Tolkien's own hand. He marked it himself
Tolkien's own hand.
Yeah.
That annotated map is awesome. I mean, I am glad that the Bodleian was able to buy it, because I guess they were very concerned that it would end up in private hands and disappear.
Never see the light of
so
day
they
again.
were able to raise enough money to buy it themselves. I've seen images of it, and we'll post a picture of it on our show notes. It is phenomenal. Look at
let's
the
definitely
detail.
Do that. Let's do that, because I remember the map. I remember seeing pictures of it online. I don't think I looked closely enough, or probably just wasn't thinking about Dorwinion at the time, and didn't realize it was on there. That's great.
It's so cool to see. I mean, he's got it like written down and with a little arrow to a spot, because I think Sea of Rhûn was actually written there. And he was trying to put it like where that text is. So she put it there in the map that she did, which is a pretty cool map. Cool. And I think was the first time that any of his characters were illustrated. Because it was 1969. I don't think by anybody else other than him. I don't think at that point they'd had any other artists, do his characters. I could be wrong on that one.
You mean like on a map or like in the books?
They were illustrated on the map. They're the top and bottom borders of the map have
cool.
have character drawings. Like the top, it's the Fellowship walking away from the viewer.
Okay.
And then at the bottom is like the Nazgul, and you see Shelob, and you see, I think you see Gollum. So it's like the good guys at the top, bad guys at the bottom.
I need to pull this thing up. I should be looking at this. Oh, well.
Yeah, it's really cool. So we'll put that on our show notes, and also if we can remember, we'll put it on our Facebook page.
Yeah, let's do that.
With like maybe as a comment on the post that we link to.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, and one more thing about Dorwinion, and then I promise we'll get back to the text. But
that's okay. This is really the most interesting part of the chapter, isn't it?
This is such a fun part. Yeah, there's just so much cool stuff here.
Yeah, there's a ton.
As our resident, word nerd in chief, I just want to talk about the name of the place, Dorwinion. Now, it looks to me like it's modeled on the place name Dorthonion, the land of pines. Remember, we saw that a lot in the First Age.
Darthonion.
Darthonion. Yeah, yes, that's right. Good old Darth Onion. So Dorthonion is the
Scallion, I am your father.
Oh man, that's awful. I'm imagining
terrible.
A black armored
onion-shaped
onion head
armor.
Sith Lord with a really
skinny little scallion dangling on the edge of a Anyway,
with a really pungent lightsaber.
Yeah, ooh.
But
yeah.
So, oh man.
Sorry.
Dorthonion is the land of pines, and that comes from Dor, land, Thon, pine, and then Eon, I-O-N, basically a genitive ending of pines.
Right, of. Yeah.
Except with Dorwinion, the middle element win, W-I-N, just looks like the word wine.
It does, doesn't it?
At first I looked at this and I thought, well, Tolkien was just doing some bad Elvish, probably just because he didn't care. This was just some one-off
I could do some bad Elvish. I could do some bad Elvish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can't remember an Elvis song. Right as I say I can do a bad Elvish.
No, I know.
Something about my blue suede shoes or Jailhouse Rock or something. Anyway, that was terrible. Probably better that I can't think of any.
It's probably best that we can't think of any of these songs to.
You're right, though. The wind really does. I mean, it
just looks like wine.
It does. It does totally like Land of Wines, except
Land of Wines. It would be super fun.
Well, yeah,
but that's not what it is. Of course,
of course
Tolkien
not.
Would not do that. He wouldn't ever do bad Elvish, even as a joke, a private joke for himself.
No, that's true.
In that same linguistic essay that's in Parma El Delamberon, the same essay that mentions
I'm glad
the
you're
location
pronouncing
of
that,
Dorwinion.
by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll put myself on the chopping block.
Parma something.
Tolkien says that Dorwinion actually means young land country, or land of Gwynion, which seems to be related to a word Gwynwen that means youth or freshness. So it's not just land of wines, unfortunately, because that would be hilarious. It's land of youth,
the land of the millennials,
fresh young land. The land with you just imagine flowing meadows and flowers and vines and things like that.
Very fertile land, very
yeah.
Wow, I love that.
So
I mean, you get the door because it's land. I mean, we talked about the door, right? Mordor, Gondor, and Dor-loma and all that. But yeah, I would have thought for sure that Winion was just like, well, I guess he got lazy on wine and decided to just make it win.
Yeah. He's like, well, I'm never going to mention wine again in Elvish, so I'm not going to come up with a word for wine in Elvish. But he probably did.
I'm sure he did. I mean,
it's probably in that same essay if I could get a hold of it.
Probably. I wonder if there's something to do with kind of like almost a fountain of youth sort of thing going on here. You know how we've been hitting so strongly on like fairy type concepts, and I know there's something in Celtic. I really wish I'd dug into this, and maybe we will for the Patreon postscript. But there's something in Celtic myths about something like that.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen something on this before. Maybe we should look into that.
Yeah, let's look at that for the postscript. That may end up being the only topic we cover, because that could take at least 10 minutes to talk about that.
It certainly could, yeah.
And there may not be much more to discuss. So, all right, well, we'll leave Dorwinion behind us and move forward to the rest of the chapter at a much faster pace, or we'll be here all night.
We promise.
So Bilbo takes the keys and frees the dwarves. He tells them, I love this, he tells them the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But not.
But we still don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that It's kind of like in a movie, where all right, here's the plan, and then they cut away.
They cut away, or they play music, and you just see people's lips moving. But that's actually in the section you're going to read next. So I'm going to stop talking and let you read that section.
Okay, thank you. It's about time. All right.
Oh, man.
At last, after much blundering, they came to Thorin's dungeon, far down in a deep place, and fortunately not far from the cellars. "Upon my word," said Thorin, when Bilbo whispered to him to come out and join his friends, "Gandalf spoke true as usual. A pretty fine burglar you make, it seems, when the time comes. I'm sure we are all forever at your service, whatever happens after this. But what comes next?" Bilbo saw that the time had come to explain his idea, as far as he could, but he did not feel at all sure how the dwarves would take it. His fears were quite justified, for they did not like it a bit, and started grumbling loudly in spite of their danger. "We shall be bruised and battered to pieces, and drowned too, for certain," they muttered. "We thought you had got some sensible notion when you managed to get hold of the keys. This is a mad idea." "Very well," said Bilbo, very downcast, and also rather annoyed. "Come along, back to your nice cells, and I will lock you all in again, and you can sit there comfortably and think of a better plan. But I don't suppose I shall ever get hold of the keys again, even if I feel inclined to try."
Oh.
That was too much for them, and they calmed down.
Yeah. Well, and of course, they may not have
I bet they
explicitly
did.
laid out the plan, but at this point, it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
It's going to involve water, and it involves bruising and battering, and we're probably thinking it involves
that's true.
barrels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be a safe bet.
They don't like this idea very much. I can't say I blame them, but
No, I can't. You can't blame them. I mean,
What
I'm
other
going to stuff
options
you in
are
a barrel and drop you through this hole in the floor.
yeah. And who knows if you'll be upside down that entire time? And who knows if the barrel's watertight? And
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really miserable concept. But like he says, well, we can put you back in the cells and just wait until we come up with something else.
Yeah, he's basically treating the dwarves like I treat my kids.
I know, I love that. I know, I do the same thing.
Like, all right, fine. You can.
Fine, you don't like this for dinner? Great. You don't have to have
You
dinner.
can go upstairs and go to bed.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, goodness. Good
But
stuff.
I do love. Yeah, when they. I know. And so then what happens? They Bilbo gives the keys back, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
I guess he's a burglar, but an honest one. Right?
Exactly. So they're sneaking back down to the cellars, and as they pass by the happily sleeping guard and butler,
Still happily snoring with
Just-
smiles upon them.
yeah, exactly.
That's a great sentence.
It
I know
is, isn't
we
it?
didn't read this part, but
I love
the
it.
wine of Dorwinion brings deep and pleasant dreams.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe it's certainly different from the Elvish enchantment
may-
in the river, but
You may not feel good when you wake up,
no.
but the dreams are pleasant.
Especially if you're the chief guard and your prisoners have all escaped.
Yeah, no kidding. He is going to have more than a hangover.
But at least his keys are back on his belt, and there will be
Yep.
no obvious, well, somebody stole your keys. I mean, that's good,
That's true.
or you left them
Yeah.
someplace. That's
That's got to make it a little better for him. It'll just be this sort of mysterious.
yeah. They'll think it was
Wait,
all
what
about
happened?
magic.
Yeah.
Which I like. I love that Bilbo actually says that or thinks that no, he says that.
Oh,
He
yeah. I
actually
think we
says
had-
that.
Yeah, he does.
He
They'll
wasn't a
think we had
bad
very strong
fellow,
magic.
quite decent. They'll think we had a very strong magic to pass through all those locked doors. I love it.
Yeah.
So
That's a nice comment that, he's not a bad fellow and he was quite decent to them. We saw that earlier, that the elves treat even their prisoners pretty well.
they do, yeah.
But,
Even if they
it's a
scatter them
nice-
all over the palace into random cells all over, which again I still
Yeah, that's just.
I was listening
that's
to that.
That's just inefficient.
Yeah, it's the weirdest
prisoner
design concepts. I mean,
Yeah.
I was listening to that for our postscript, in preparation for our postscript and for editing it, and I just thought, I just came across that and was like, really? I mean, who in the world are you imprisoning? Really? You're not imprisoning spiders. How often do other people come through that need to go to
Why
jail?
do you need that many cells?
Yeah, you've got 13 cells to put these dwarves in, but okay. Maybe he's a little paranoid.
Well, and he separated them so much, he must have more than 13
He
cells.
must.
To be,
Unless he just has
I'm
exactly-
imagining a very large cell block, and he's putting them in the 13 most scattered cells in the cell block.
Yeah, I think it was on separate floors, too. Like, they were all over the palace. I was picturing,
I think it was.
there's 3 cells on the 4th floor in the west wing and 2 cells on the 3rd floor in the east
could be,
wing.
yeah.
And just kind of made no sense, but,
Maybe just kind of added cells
Yeah,
as things
yeah,
went on.
exactly. He's like, well, I don't have any room to put you in jail, so I have to build another cell.
King Eärendil, we have a surplus. Build more cells.
That's right.
Build
That's
more
right.
dungeons.
We're not going to change our sentencing guidelines. We're just going to build more cells.
Right.
So
prison overpopulation. It's even a problem in Mirkwood.
That's right. Even a third age issue in fairyland. So they get down there. They start to see what's in the barrels, and they find that some of them are empty. And in fact, I know that you just read a passage, but I'm actually having you read 2 in a row because I think later I take 2 in a row, or maybe I've got something longer. I don't know why I marked 2 for you, but I did.
I think it was one of those. I think I understood when we first made the decision, and now I don't remember.
Oh, you know what it was? I think it's because we originally broke this chapter at a different spot. I think that's exactly what it was. And I'd given you the closing section of what would have been the first half. And then the opening of the
next one.
That's correct.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I'll power through.
I think you can manage.
All right. If I could find the page. There it is. Okay. They soon found 13 with room enough for a dwarf in each. In fact, some were too roomy, and as they climbed in, the dwarves thought anxiously of the shaking and the bumping they would get inside. Though Bilbo did his best to find straw and other stuff to pack them in as cozily as could be managed in a short time. At last, 12 dwarves were stowed. Thorin had given a lot of trouble, and turned and twisted in his tub, and grumbled like a large dog in a small kennel, while Balin, who came last, made a great fuss about his air holes and said he was stifling, even before his lid was on. Bilbo had done what he could to close holes in the sides of the barrels, and to fix on all the lids as safely as could be managed, and now he was left alone again, running round putting the finishing touches to the packing, and hoping against hope that his plan would come off.
Okay, all I can think of is the discussions we've had on claustrophobia lately. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with Balin.
Yeah.
I'm going to need more than air holes.
It would feel a bit stifling. Yeah, and you don't know how long this river journey is going to be. You don't know
hours, days, who knows?
Right, who knows? It's really, they're trusting him
with their lives.
I mean, with their lives.
Quite seriously, very much so.
Quite literally, yeah.
Yeah. My goodness, what a moment this is.
You know, between this and between the moment I didn't read before this, where it talks about how the wine barrels weren't much use because they couldn't easily be opened at the end.
Yeah.
Nor could they be secured again. That made me wonder about the differences between different kinds of barrels. And I haven't I didn't think about this until earlier today, and I didn't really have time to look into it too much. And I don't have time to, study the cooper's trade more than I have.
Yeah.
But I mean, clearly, not all barrels are the same. And I think
makes sense.
The message here is barrels that are meant to hold apples or butter or things like that don't have to be watertight or waterproof in the way that a wine barrel does.
Right.
And I do know that once they seal a wine barrel, they don't usually, they don't take the top off to serve it. They breach the cask or there's a bung in it.
Yep.
I don't know. That's just interesting to think about. The wine barrels were not much use, which tells me that the barrels that were much use were the dry goods barrels.
Yeah.
That weren't watertight.
Yeah, not fully watertight, at least.
Not fully watertight. And we do know that, he says later that, some of the barrels shipped water, and it's a scary prospect.
It's a real scary thought, but you're right. These barrels are definitely not the waterproof barrels that you might think of for wine.
For wine or beer or anything like that.
Yeah. What and then I got to say, though, the comedy gold in this moment of Thorin grumbling like a large dog in a small kennel, turning and twisting. This is the very important dwarf stuck in a barrel.
Yeah. I know, right, yeah.
Totally humiliating, I mean, he's humbling himself here in a big way.
Yeah.
He's the king, man. Don't put me in a barrel.
Nobody puts Thorin in a barrel.
Nobody puts Thorin in a barrel. Oh, that's another good reference. But all right, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up right after that, and with the arrival of the some very happy elves,
the party elves, the fraternity brothers.
What up, bro? All right, a number of elves came laughing and talking into the cellars and singing snatches of song. They had left a merry feast in one of the halls and were bent on returning as soon as they could. "Where's old Galleon, the butler?" said one. "I haven't seen him at the tables tonight. He ought to be here now to show us what is to be done." "I shall be angry if the old slow coach is late," said another. "I have no wish to waste time down here while the song is up." "Ha ha!" came a cry. "Here's the old villain with his head on a jug. He's been having a little feast all to himself and his friend the captain." "Shake him, wake him," shouted the others impatiently. Galien was not at all pleased at being shaken or wakened, and still less at being laughed at. "You're all late," he grumbled. "Here I am waiting and waiting down here while you fellows drink and make merry and forget your tasks. Small wonder if I fall asleep from weariness." "Small wonder," said they, "when the explanation stands close at hand in a jug. Come, give us a taste of your sleeping draught before we fall to. No need to wake the turnkey yonder. He's had his share by the looks of it." Then they drank once round and became mighty merry all of a sudden, but they did not quite lose their wits. "Save us, Galien," cried some. "You began your feasting early and muddled your wits. You've stacked some full casks here instead of the empty ones, if there's anything in weight." "Get on with the work," growled the butler. "There's nothing in a feeling of weight in an idle tosspot's arms. These are the ones to go and no others. Do as I say."
Boy, talk about... That's a great scene.
Isn't it? I really wish that we'd seen that scene. That would have been a fun one to see.
That would have been so cool. Yeah, that would have been a great scene to see, yeah. Just elves having... You don't see elves having fun.
Yeah, little drunken fun.
This kind of fun.
Yeah.
Drunken fun. And, man, they're just not nice to each other, aren't they? They're just calling each other names, calling each other villain and... Tosspot. I know you got some stuff on... You got some word nerdery on Tosspot, don't you?
Oh, I do, actually. Well, actually, I did. Hold on, I can't find my notes.
I mean, it's like the idea of like somebody tossing back a pot of wine, right?
Right, I think so, yeah, like tossing back a jug of, yeah. I don't know why I just assumed that when it was word nerd that it was going to be you, but yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It does.
I saw your note on it.
It does typically refer to a drunkard, because ale was served in ceramic pots rather than glasses or goblets or anything. They were in pots. So somebody who was a tosspot was, like you said, somebody just
tossing back pots of beer
one after the other. Just somebody who's just tossing it back.
That's exactly what I was thinking, because I know in parts of Australia, I want to say in the Melbourne area, they refer you can order beer
in a pot.
They call a glass of beer a pot. Now it's not that it's like an 8 or 12 ounce glass or something like that.
Oh,
but they call it a pot in the pubs.
Oh, interesting. Very cool.
So there must be some old word nerdery about pot meaning a drinking vessel of some kind.
Very interesting.
But yeah, that's it's just so funny. I mean, just the names they call each other, and
Slow Coach.
It's almost like, yeah, I know.
Villain.
They're all just ribbing each other constantly.
Oh, yeah. It's all in fun.
Honestly, it is all in fun, and as I'm thinking about it now, I mean, we even saw the Rivendell elves, kind of making fun of the dwarves and their long beards.
Not each other.
Like
they were making fun of the dwarves, but yeah.
That's true. That's true, but it was still kind of good-natured ribbing,
Yeah, this is good-natured ribbing.
I think that's what this is.
Oh, definitely. You have to wonder, though, if he had been sober when they came down, would he have put a little more weight into their claim that the barrels were full? You know what I'm saying? I mean, when they say...
Could be, yeah.
Oh, you've put full casks here instead of the empty ones, and he's like...
Yeah.
If he'd been sober, he might have been like, really? Well, let me check one of those out.
Like, what? Really? Yeah, let me check it, as opposed to just like, I know what I did.
You're a drunk. You're weak because you've been drinking too much upstairs.
Right.
He doesn't want to admit he's the one who's more drunk
as he can barely stand up.
Yeah, exactly. I also thought, and this was interesting, that Galien, there's nobody else, because we don't get the name Thranduil. We don't get the name of any of the other elves. He's the only elf named in The Hobbit.
That is a great trivia item. Yeah.
Isn't it? Who is the only elf named in The Hobbit? Because people might say Elrond.
People might say
Thranduil.
Mm-hmm. But it's Galien.
It's Galien. It's the only one who's named. Yep. Because, of course, Elrond is half-elven.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I know. That is a really fun little bit of Tolkien trivia for folks.
Yeah.
I've actually seen it on Tolkien quizzes online and stuff. And
have you? I have not. But
once or twice,
would have gotten it wrong.
Often.
Yeah, I would have gotten it wrong, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I probably.
I can't remember I can't remember if I got it wrong or right. I'm going to say I got it right, just because.
Yeah. It's very. Of course you did.
I'm going to pretend I got it right every single time I took that quiz.
So we get a tiny little bit of a song that you're not going to be reading, but that's the one where you got the heave ho splash plump.
Yeah. Yep.
Kind of a little bit of onomatopoeia there, a little kind of a small echo of the goblin song in that sense, in a very Elvish context, of course.
Yep.
but I like that.
Yeah,
so.
it's cool. It's a work song, but it's a very lovely Elvish work song.
I love the one that we're going to look at later. Again, I don't think either of us are reading the long one, but there's some portions of it we'll take a look at.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm looking ahead at the long one. I'm sorry. I'm like.
Oh no, I was looking at the short one.
The short one is not really
goblin-y.
that lovely or Elvish. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a work song, but it's not very lovely or Elvish. I was
wondering when you said lovely, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, I guess if you say so.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was anything lovely about heave ho splash plump.
I'm just all this talk of elves drinking wine has made me sleepy. So
there you go. Well, may the may the dreams that it brings you be deep and pleasant.
yeah.
Let's see. So you noticed something. We've talked about Wind in the Willows before. You caught a very interesting similarity, huh?
That's a fun one. I've grown to love the book The Wind in the Willows. I've read it to my kids a few times. Tolkien was a fan of it,
yes,
which I didn't realize the first time I read it. But actually, Anderson also points this out. I think one of his footnotes to this chapter talks about a similarity between the butler's pantry in this scene and a very significant butler's pantry in Wind in the Willows. There's actually...
Yes.
If folks have read this book, they'll remember near the end of the book, Toad, Rat, Mole, and Badger all actually break into Toad Hall through a trap door in the butler's pantry because Toad Hall has actually been overtaken by weasels who've been squatting there since Toad was incarcerated for stealing a car. Yes, everyone needs to read this book because it's incredible.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So yeah, they actually there's like this great there's this great heist scene where these four animal characters are breaking into a butler's
back
pantry.
into Toad's home. Yeah.
And then this huge, battle ensues with, there's like swords and gunplay with all these animals.
Yeah.
Which is, it's hilarious. It's a great book.
It really is funny, but it's all through a trap door like this.
It's all through a trap door, and that's just like this. They were breaking into a trap door, and now Tolkien's having his characters break out through a trap door.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
That's just neat. That's neat, and I love seeing these because Tolkien was a fan of Wind in the Willows. He mentioned it in a couple of his letters, as I think I probably talked about before.
I think we have.
So
now you get a passage again. Well, of course, this is before we get there. Let's bring the narrative up to speed. So now the barrels are out. They've actually gotten the barrels into the water. The dwarves are in the river.
Yep.
And
now
Shawn picks up.
There's a little problem.
Now there's a little head scratcher here.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah. It was just at this moment that Bilbo suddenly discovered the weak point in his plan. Most likely you saw it some time ago and have been laughing at him, but I don't suppose you would have done half as well yourselves in his place. Of course, he was not in a barrel himself, nor was there anyone to pack him in, even if there had been a chance. It looked as if he would certainly lose his friends this time. Nearly all of them had already disappeared through the dark trap door, and get utterly left behind and have to stay lurking as a permanent burglar in the elf caves forever. For even if he could have escaped through the upper gates at once, he had precious small chance of ever finding the dwarves again. He did not know the way by land to the place where the barrels were collected. He wondered what on earth would happen to them without him, for he had not had time to tell the dwarves all that he had learned, or what he had meant to do once they were out of the wood. While all these thoughts were passing through his mind, the elves, being very merry, began to sing a song round the river door.
The elves, being very merry, read drunk, or at least buzzed. I hadn't caught this before, but I love the little aside again. We haven't had as many of these lately, right? We had a lot of them in the first couple chapters.
The fourth wall break.
The fourth wall break. The narrator talking to the reader saying, well, you may have figured it out, but you know what? Really, you wouldn't have done half as well.
You wouldn't have done that well because, he's in a tough spot
really
here.
is.
He's got to think quickly.
And it's another one of these great, well-timed fourth wall breaks, reminding us as a reader to place ourselves in Bilbo's shoes. In Bilbo's shoes,
and also to give him a little bit more credit than we might be giving him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In case we're sitting back thinking, well, why didn't you think of this, you idiot? Well, trust me, he's got a lot on his mind trying to figure this out.
He's got quite a few things going on. He's been running back and forth from one cell to another, and they're all over the place in these caves. As I think we've mentioned.
Yeah, it's a typical MMO fetch quest.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Go get the dwarf, bring him back. Go get another
this
dwarf,
item and
bring
it back to me. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. And then once you have all 12 of them, go find the 13th one together.
It's like, why didn't you tell me that earlier? I could have just gotten it when I was
more efficient,
one zone over.
I know, seriously. It very much feels like a fetch quest now that I'm thinking about it. So we're not actually
and all on a timer.
Seriously,
where you don't really know how much time you have.
No, it's unknown. You probably failed this mission at least 6 times before you figured it out.
Probably.
And then you had to look it up in a wiki. Okay, so we're not going to read the elven song.
And then the elves find him and kill him, and he has to respawn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
or get rezzed.
Yeah. I mean, why don't you just level up and come back? That's probably your better bet.
Man.
We could go on. Could go on.
We certainly could.
Anyway, so the elven song.
So
we're not going to actually read the song, but there's some really cool bits.
This is the nice elven song.
This is the nice elven song.
For a work song. I mean, it's like an ode to the barrels. Only elves would sing an ode to the barrels that they're dumping through this trapdoor into the river.
Yeah.
But
let's see.
I don't know. I had some thoughts on it. I don't know if you've got what you've got on it.
Well, let's see. What do we have on it? We've got some of the. Well, I mean, I'm going to let you launch first while I'm thinking.
Okay,
about stuff.
I've got a few things. I've got a few things here. I've got a few things noted down.
Good.
I feel like
I managed not to put some things in my notes that I'm thinking of
because we didn't really talk about this before we started recording. So there's a neat. So it's very Elvish because obviously there's a lot of nature imagery here.
Yeah.
That shouldn't surprise anybody. What I did find surprising is they sing of the barrels going back to Lake Town as almost like this rebirth imagery to it. They're talking about the barrels emerging out of the caves, leave the halls, the caverns, the northern mountain steep, and then kind of floating down beyond the world of trees, out into the whispering breeze, and then emerging into the open, to the stars in the sky, from underground into starlight.
Yeah. That reminds me now a little bit about what I was thinking of. It made me think of the Dwarven Wind Song.
Yeah.
That's
a good catch.
Yeah. There's this sense of, the wind traveling from point A to point B, and then specifically the parallel with this part about follow stars that leap up the heavens cold and steep really feels like that, when the wind leaves Arda,
goes
essentially.
Up into the stars. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. Well, so there is definitely a kind of a mystical, spiritual aspect to this song of they're singing to these barrels. It's really neat. The idea that they would sing of barrels in this way, sending the barrels back to Lake Town to be refilled, which is what's happening. They're basically recycling, but they're singing of it as a rebirth, going back into use. And there are definitely echoes of that Dwarven song there.
Yeah, no,
it's neat. It's definitely it's a reminder that you should always read the poetry in Tolkien because there's cool stuff there that you may not always catch.
Yes, you should. Well, I know that one of the thoughts I had actually belongs in a later portion, so I'm going to skip that and come back to it. But the poem itself, I think the only thing that really had come to my mind was that similar to the Dwarven song. But I love the use of some of these older words like the kine and oxen. Which is cattle.
Should we? I was going to say, should we define kine for anybody who's not?
That's why I just tried to do that.
Well, you just did. Yeah.
That's what I thought. And then we get back to gardens.
It's an old plural of cows, basically.
It is, yeah. Cows, kine, cow, kine instead of cow, cows.
Yeah. Right.
Just like oxen instead of It's not like we have oxes. It's not as simple add an s.
Right.
Back to gardens on the hills where the berry swells and fills. So it almost sounds like we're talking, even though it's a berry. Grape, is that a berry?
Well, it sounds like back to Dorwinion, doesn't it?
Right.
I said Lake Town a moment ago, but it does sound like they're talking about sending them back.
south away. I think we're talking about the wine barrels there.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't think that's a stretch at all because I think when I look back at that passage I read from the lay, I think he talked about the berries of the burning south.
Right, exactly.
So
they go past Lake Town, and then they would make their way south. They would portage the barrels past the waterfall, and then down into the river and down to almost to the Sea of Rune. Yeah.
So there you go. So they would go all that way.
And I'm going to go ahead and pick up right after that the journey of the barrels and the barrel rider, as he will refer to himself. So now the very last barrel was being rolled to the doors. In despair and not knowing what else to do, poor little Bilbo caught hold of it and was pushed over the edge with it. Down into the water he fell, splash, into the cold, dark water with the barrel on top of him. He came up again, spluttering and clinging to the wood like a rat, but for all his efforts, he could not scramble on top. Every time he tried, the barrel rolled round and ducked him under again. It was really empty and floated light as a cork. Though his ears were full of water, he could hear the elves still singing in the cellar above. Then suddenly, the trap doors fell to with a boom, and their voices faded away. He was in the dark tunnel, floating in icy water, all alone. For you cannot count friends that are all packed up in barrels. I'm sorry, that's just, that's kind of, well, of course.
You can't exactly have a conversation with them.
No, that's true. really, you can't count them. They might not even, they're like Schrodinger's friends. They might not be dead. They might not be alive.
They may not be alive, yeah.
Yeah.
Schrodinger's
dwarves.
Schrodinger's dwarves. Oh, that's
We're going to have
great.
to remember that one, aren't we?
Yeah.
Schrodinger's dwarves.
We'll have to come up with a way to do a little diagram, like the diagram of the cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Box open. Yeah, we should figure out a way to do that.
Oh, that's going to be hilarious.
Live dwarf, dead dwarf.
Schrodinger's dwarves. So, I can't believe that one came to mind.
That's just brilliant.
I'm glad it did.
That's great.
So very soon, a gray patch came in the darkness ahead. He heard the creak of the water gate being hauled up, and he found that he was in the midst of a bobbing and bumping mass of casks and tubs, all pressing together to pass under the arch and get out into the open stream. He had as much as he could do to prevent himself from being hustled and battered to bits, but at last the jostling crowd began to break up and swing off, one by one, under the stony arch and away. My goodness, what a moment.
So he just basically grabbed onto a barrel.
Yeah, it's like, well, I've got no choice. This is it. Whatever happens, I've got to at least try this.
Yeah, grabbed the barrel and just dunked into the water.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and
miserable.
Trying to get on top of an empty barrel.
It's going to keep on rolling.
It's just going to keep on rolling. Every time the center of gravity moves, it's just going to shift right around.
It's just terrible. What a moment.
It's more comedy gold. I would have loved to have seen this. Yeah.
Every time he tries to get to the top, it just bloop, bloop. He's like constantly having to climb this barrel like a, they talk about how he's wet like a rat. I'm thinking he's almost like a rat in one of those balls. He's just having to keep climbing a barrel that keeps rotating.
Wow, yeah, like a wheel or a ball.
Yeah. But he's on the outside of the wheel rather than on the inside.
Right. Yeah.
My goodness, what a hilarious moment.
It's sad and hilarious at the time.
Is.
Yeah.
It's only funny because he survives.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness, it's pretty funny. And then he realizes, of course, it's probably just as well he couldn't get on top because the gate was too low. He starts to worry about the dwarves. He wonders whether, I know they're not really full on waterproof, but I hope they're watertight enough. He was concerned because some of them were very low in the water. Then he's like, well, I hope I put the lids on tight enough. It's kind of like, I hope I didn't leave the stove on or something. I hope I didn't leave the iron on and you're, on a 2-week vacation.
And I hope I didn't stuff glowing in that one so that his face is on the bottom now.
Oh, man. Being upside down. Oh, that'd be miserable.
Man,
what a mess.
But these are just barrels floating. They could roll. Yeah. They're rolling.
Sometimes
even the
they're
ones
upside
with dwarves
down.
in them
Sometimes
could be rolling around.
Yeah,
you have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, this would be like the world's worst amusement park ride. Like you couldn't pay me enough to go on this ride.
I don't know. I'd still ride it.
I don't know. This is like combining the teacups with Splash Mountain and add a dose of total claustrophobia. Really, it's. There's impossible death.
Actually, yeah, right. There's actually, I won't digress too long on this, but there's actually a place in Edinburgh, Scotland, where you can, it's like a whiskey experience, like a tourist kind of thing, where you can go and learn about how whiskey is made.
Right.
And part of the attraction is actually a barrel ride through through a movie. And one of my friends told me about this thing like many years ago, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you get to ride in a barrel and learn about learn about how Scotch whiskey is made. And
Is
all I
Scotch
can
barrel
imagine
made
was
by
this.
riding through barrels. I mean, I know it's made in barrels, but people ride
Well,
barrels.
it's like it's kind of like it's like a video.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, like an educational video, like you might see at like Epcot or
I
California
see.
Adventure or something
I
like
see.
that. But you're sitting in this barrel watching these videos, and you're just going by.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
I thought it was literally a barrel ride. I got you. So
no,
you're
it's
sitting
like
in
it's like a slow ride.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now I
But
got you.
I actually imagined it being like this. Like,
Yeah,
oh, wow,
yeah.
it's like a fun, fast barrel ride. I'm really imagining like something from The
Yeah,
Hobbit.
like
and-
Six Flags over Erebor.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then I went on it years later, and it was just a slow ride watching a video. I'm like, well, this isn't fun. I mean, it was a cool tourist attraction. It was
Give
very
me a couple
educational,
of shots of single malt whiskey, and
that
it
was
might be
and
more
that
fun.
was yeah, that was fun. But the barrel ride part was oversold to me a little bit.
Oh man,
Anyway,
that's hilarious. Okay,
I have digressed.
you have digressed, but it's a good digression. It's fine. I did notice, and I didn't read it, but there's this line about Bilbo wondering whether he would die of cold, hypothermia, before his luck turned, and whether he should let go and try to swim to the other bank. Now, that really grabbed my attention, and so I was looking at it in Rateliff, and he points out...
Yeah, because that
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a very hobbity thing to do.
That's
does it?
exactly right. That my first thought was, well, that doesn't seem very hobbity. There's no hobbit in the world who would think of swimming for the other shore. I mean, most
Right.
hobbits wouldn't have even thought of this idea because it involves water.
In getting anywhere near the water, yeah.
Exactly. But Rateliff points out that this shows that the idea of hobbits, because this idea was in even the earliest typescript, that this idea of hobbits being afraid of water and not being able to swim, as he says, was a late invention belonging to the Lord of the Rings era and not part of the original conception at all. Interesting. He kind of gave them like a racial weakness,
Right.
to use a D&D term, but he did
Yeah.
it, after he'd already created the race. So,
That's interesting.
yeah, it is just a little interesting little sidebar about that.
Yeah.
But
So
it does
maybe
make you
not,
think.
Not as significant of a thought maybe for Bilbo as we might think with
Right.
the knowledge of Lord of the Rings later. Yeah.
Right. If you're thinking of hobbits in Lord of the Rings, it's a different story.
Be like, wow, he's thinking about swimming to the bank. He must be scared on
He
the
must
barrel.
be, yeah.
But we
Not quite.
Yeah. Not
It is
quite.
interesting that he's actually concerned about, hypothermia in the water, which he should be.
Yeah.
But given the time frame that this was written, this would have been, when did he write this? So, mid-30s, we're talking about what,
Mid-30s.
10, 12 years
Early
after the
30s, yeah.
Titanic? 10 to 12 years after that, and all those U-boat
Oh, yeah,
attacks
sure.
and Lusitania, when was that? I mean, I'm just wondering if these kinds of things were more in the public consciousness, the idea of being, really stranded in the water.
being floating on a piece of wood in cold
Yeah.
waters.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good thought. I mean, yeah, because the Titanic.
Well, the Lusitania was
1915.
So I don't remember
Yeah.
when the Titanic sank, but I want to say it was
1912.
1911, 1912. Yeah,
1912.
1912.
Yep.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, 1912 and 1915. And this is written, 20 years later. I guess maybe it's not as related, but I couldn't help but think of that.
Well, it probably was more of. It was probably something people thought about more
Yeah.
than we do today.
Yeah. And
whereas,
hypothermia would have been a real risk for some of the troops, at least in World War I as well.
Yeah.
So
I mean, obviously, air travel has replaced boat travel for
Yeah.
most people, and the way that you probably can imagine that the way we generally think about and worry about, plane crashes is probably,
right.
Maybe for somebody of Tolkien's time, they would have
boat
thought
sinking.
about
Right.
boat sinkings. Yeah,
My goodness. Now, if I could take a boat to Mythmoot, that'd be pretty cool.
that would be.
It'd
That
be a
would be
very
lovely.
long boat ride from L.A., right? Have to go through the Panama Canal.
You'd
and-
circumnavigate the. Oh, no, that's true. Panama Canal.
Well, yeah,
I
I'm
forgot
not going
about
to go all the way
that
down
thing.
to, the Cape,
Cape Horn.
Cape Horn. I was going to Cape of Good Hope is South Africa. Yeah, I'm not going to go all the way down to Tierra del Fuego and,
Yeah.
come all the way up around the other side. Yeah, I guess I'll have
It
to
would be
leave
funny
tomorrow.
if you did.
That would be funny. We'd have to raise a lot more money, though.
Yes,
We'd
yes,
have to
we would,
raise a lot more.
unless we stowed away in some barrels.
Mostly because I have to buy my wife like a, a new house, a new car, a personal, assistant to help her while I'm gone for
While
that
you're
long.
gone, yeah.
Yeah, no, not
Yeah.
going to happen. We digress.
Oh, man.
So
We
you're
have
gonna,
digressed a bit.
We're going to talk about luck. You're going to talk about finding a place to rest here.
All right. The luck turned all right before long. The eddying current carried several barrels close ashore at one point, and there for a while they stuck against some hidden root. Then Bilbo took the opportunity of scrambling up the side of his barrel while it was held steady against another. Up he crawled like a drowned rat, and lay on the top spread out to keep the balance as best he could. The breeze was cold, but better than the water, and he hoped he would not suddenly roll off again when they started off once more. Before long, the barrels broke free again, and turned and twisted off down the stream and out into the main current. Then he found it quite as difficult to stick on as he had feared, but he managed it somehow, though it was miserably uncomfortable. Luckily he was very light, and the barrel was a good big one, and being rather leaky had now shipped a small amount of water. All the same, it was like trying to ride, without bridle or stirrups, a round-bellied pony that was always thinking of rolling on the grass.
Oh, that's an image, isn't it?
That is a great,
That really
great
is cool.
simile. I love that.
It is. That's awesome.
Uncomfortable, I like that.
Uncomfortable. There are so many things here that popped up that were totally unrelated to our notes. The eddying current made me think of that line out of Hitchhiker's Guide about eddies in the space-time
Eddies in the space-time continuum?
Yeah, yeah.
What is he doing there?
Yeah, what's he doing there exactly? Why is Eddie in the space-time continuum? Great stuff. And then there's the second reference to a drowned rat. Well, the other one was just a rat. Now it's a drowned rat.
Right.
So that was interesting that he used that same metaphor or simile.
A lot of comparisons of hobbits to rats throughout the legendarium.
Yeah, there really are. Or rabbits, as the case may be.
We've talked about rabbits. I don't think we've talked too much about rats.
I don't think we
before,
have.
It seems to come up a lot in Lord of the Rings, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And that the barrel had now shipped a small amount of water. I wanted to make sure that has nothing to do with the concept of shipping in fan fiction. That's totally different shipped. That's just entirely different. Wanted to make sure.
Man, my mind had not gone there, but thank you. Now it has.
Hey, you're very welcome. I'm not sure how a barrel ships a small amount of water, but
barrel ships a small
considering
amount.
what
Somebody
people ship,
will write a story about it now, I'm sure.
Yeah, and how they spent the rest of their lives together happily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just not go there. So,
it is a word we don't see a lot anymore. Ship in this sense.
Not in this sense.
Take on water, for a boat to take on water.
Yeah, exactly. Like you pointed out, though, miserably uncomfortable. That's a big, that ties into our overarching theme of the entire book, this concept of comfort. We get the luckily again, in case we were wondering.
In case you're wondering what role luck has
played.
That's
the
other
other theme, right?
These shenanigans here, yeah.
Exactly. We get a little bit of the geography, right? We get the trees growing thinner. We get, where we are in terms of the main water, the forest river. We get the dancing reflections of clouds and of stars.
There's some really beautiful stuff here.
There really is
beautiful imagery,
and a great illustration from Tolkien. Something about it's him on a barrel going through the river and through the woods. I'll see if I can't find that for our show notes because it's one of my favorite illustrations of his. They do get swept out into this kind of bay in the side of the river. So that they could get run ashore, and then the raft elves pull them together into a big, kind of a big raft of barrels and roped them together and left them till the morning. So I love that. I mean, the dwarves, some of them might be upside down all night long.
Yep.
Miserable. So, we feel sorry for Bilbo because he has a cold and he's, dripping wet and he's trying to figure out how to get this food and things like that. Oh, by the way, the illustration is called Bilbo Comes to the Huts of the Raft Elves. That's the illustration.
Okay.
So if you Google that, you'll find it, I'm sure. And it's a color illustration.
We'll look for that. We'll look for that for the show notes.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and read, not quite to the end of the chapter, but almost. So we're going to go ahead and tackle that here. There is no need to tell you much of his adventures that night, for now we are drawing near the end of the eastward journey, and coming to the last and greatest adventure, so we must hurry on. Of course, helped by his magic ring, he got on very well at first, but he was given away in the end by his wet footsteps, and the trail of drippings that he left wherever he went or sat. And also he began to snivel, and wherever he tried to hide, he was found out by the terrific explosions of his suppressed sneezes. I love that.
That's so funny.
So funny.
That's a great one.
That is. Very soon there was a fine commotion in the village by the riverside, but Bilbo escaped into the woods, carrying a loaf and a leather bottle of wine and a pie that did not belong to him. The rest of the night he had to pass, wet as he was and far from a fire, but the bottle helped him to do that, and he actually dozed a little on some dry leaves, even though the year was getting late and the air was chilly. He woke again with a specially loud sneeze. It was already gray morning, and there was a merry racket down by the river. They were making up a raft of barrels, and the raft elves would soon be steering it off down the stream to Lake Town. Bilbo sneezed again. He was no longer dripping, but he felt cold all over. He scrambled down as fast as his stiff legs would take him, and managed just in time to get on to the massive casks without being noticed in the general bustle. Love that. So he certainly knows how to steal food that doesn't belong to him. he's figured out that's not a problem.
It's kind of second nature to him now. Which is interesting.
I know. Yeah, he's like, well, let me see. I need food, so let me just sneak on in and get some bread and some wine and a pie. Probably not an apple pie. This is a meat pie.
A meat pie, I think we said.
Yeah. I mean, there's
probably
I don't think they have a pastry chef hanging around.
A food pie, not a dessert pie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Chicken pot pie, maybe, or shepherd's pie or something.
Or a good, ground meat hand pie or something.
Exactly. Yeah, probably more hand pie. That's true. And keeping in mind, these are elves. I mean, I know we've noticed that, but, we're not yet in the land of men. So these are more of Thranduil's subjects living in huts by the river. Like we have talked about in previous episodes, most of them live either in the trees or in huts. They don't necessarily live in the caves that Thranduil has
Right.
set up his.
And I realize now it does say in our notes the name of that illustration we were trying to think of the name of.
Yeah, Bilbo comes to the huts of the raft elves. Where do you think I got it? Where do you think I got it? Think I got it from my.
I'm sitting here scrolling down. It's there's the name of it.
There it is. You think I got it from my eidetic memory? Because I don't have one. I'm just making sure you know that.
You know what? I was impressed, but
and now you're not.
I had to reveal a little bit of the magic.
Oh man, yeah. We still need to do that. I keep trying to figure out when I'm going to write kind of a little script, not
little
script, but kind of an outline for behind the scenes for our patrons. But it's just been, this weekly schedule has been just nuts. So maybe sometime between season 2 and 3, maybe we'll take a little bit of a hiatus, and that'll give us a chance to do something like that.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Because I really want to get that out.
Fun. It would be fun to share with folks how the sausage gets made a little bit.
Exactly. I think the process would be entertaining. For about 7 of our listeners, maybe 8.
Yeah, the rest would just see these great big stacks of books and the pretty colored outline notes that we put together and work from.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
So he escapes into the woods. He eats. Poor guy must be freezing. I mean, really, he's soaking wet when he goes to sleep. I mean, I guess the good news is
he's still got these. He's still leaving these wet footprints. Wet footprints behind.
Yeah, he's dripping
as he's walking. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's a good thing for him it's September, so it's hopefully a warmer evening. But this is pretty far north. In terms of climate, it's probably a pretty cool evening. It even says, though, the air was chilly. So it's, it's not going to be a comfortable night. I'm surprised he was able to sleep. But like they said, the bottle helped him do that.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Oh, Bilbo and his drinking problem again.
Well, he's no elf.
No, he's no elf. You are correct. Interestingly, we don't read this part, but we notice that the elves complain that the barrels are a little heavy, that they don't look like they're empty, and that if this had happened in the daytime, we might have looked inside, but now it's too late. We got to give them off. Got to get them down to Lake Town. So once again, a little bit more luck.
The luck of the timing.
Pretty amazing.
Honestly,
stuff.
we even saw the word lucky. Luckily, before that, luckily there was no sun to cast an awkward shadow.
You're right. Otherwise, they might have seen him.
Yeah,
because he's trying to lay flat on the
luck is all over
raft.
the place in this escape.
It really is. I ought to count the number of times. I haven't done it yet, but I wonder how often the word luck shows up in the text. And, really, we have an ebook, so it's really not that hard. The question is, can the search happen quickly enough? And the answer is yes. It's 52 times. For luck, luckily, lucky. Though it looks like one of those is plucked up his courage, so we got to probably bring that down to 51.
All right, well, yes. Yeah. Still.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So, that will actually do it for our chapter discussion today, right, Shawn?
Yes, it will. But as always, we're going to ask folks to stick around, aren't we?
Please do. We have a lot more good stuff coming up in Barnabas Bag, and we're going to remind you about our upcoming big opportunity.
Well, it wouldn't be the Prancing Pony podcast if we didn't thoroughly make our point.
Very thoroughly.
Even when it comes to our announcements, it's just who we are. We're overachievers.
Yeah.
But yeah, seriously, folks, stick around. We've got some fun speculation coming up about some of my favorite characters. And now, the news.
With all our Monty Python references,
I didn't expect that to come out the way it came out.
No, I have expected you to say, and now for something completely different. Oh, goodness.
I should have. Missed opportunity.
That would have been hilarious, yeah.
Yeah.
Folks, if you follow us on social media, you already know. If you've been listening to the last few episodes, you already know. We have been invited to Mythmoot 5 as special guests. It's taking place this June, and I realize now there are going to be folks listening to this in like 5 years. So we're talking about 2018, way back in 2018. For those of you listening in the far future.
The distant past.
So you don't have to worry about trying to help us raise funds, by the way, because you're in the future. It's already happened. But for those of you who are listening to this in a timely fashion,
before June 20, yeah,
please, it's taking place in Virginia this summer. It's an incredible opportunity,
and we're both really excited about it. Not least because we're going to be doing a live episode broadcast from Mythmoot.
Seriously, and trying to figure out the tech for that has been, yeah.
Oh, well, you'll figure it out. I have no doubt.
Been working with the folks. Been working with the folks at Signum. We'll get it nailed.
Yeah. But we're going to be in the main room. We're going to be the only event in our time slot, and we're going to be joined by some very special guests.
Very special guests indeed. We're going to be welcoming back to the show both John Garth and Corey Olson. And we'll also get a chance to speak with Douglas Anderson, the editor of the Annotated Hobbit, and Mark Okrand, a professional conlanger and the inventor of Klingon.
It's all going to be just absolutely amazing. And I do not use that word lightly. I mean, just... if you've been listening to us, you know how much we've referenced Douglas Anderson's text. It's just a phenomenal work, and I really can't wait to talk to him about it. Mark Okrand is just a legend in conlanging, and he's definitely some things I want to talk to him about. Mm-hmm. Not to mention,
seriously,
John Garth and Corey Olson, who
John and Corey
to
back on the show again. I mean, those are two of my favorite episodes. I mean, those two guys are awesome. The show will air live on Facebook at the time of the event. We're trying to figure out how we can maybe get on other platforms. I don't know if our software will support that, but we'll try to figure that out. Anyway, it will be released the next day as episode 88. I'm going to stay up late and do some editing.
All right. Well, and if we stay on our current schedule, that event's going to be taking place right as we're wrapping up The Hobbit and getting ready for season 3, which kind of cool. I don't think we could have planned it that well.
No, I really don't think we could have. Now, Mythmoot is generously covering our event registration and our meals, and that does save us quite a bit, but we do still have to find a way to get there and to stay there for a few days. And as Shawn Bean might say, one does not simply walk to Virginia from California or even Texas. So until the Eagles start offering free flights to well-meaning podcasters, that means we have some significant costs associated with this trip.
Yeah, so we're coming to you, our listeners, to ask you for your help. At the time this episode airs, we should have a special T-shirt fundraiser going, so check that out on our Facebook page. Of course, we'd also love for you to consider joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. That's our Patreon family at patreon.com/prancingponypod. We weren't planning to do a live episode from a moot or a convention until we got to our next goal, but this opportunity presented itself and we just couldn't turn it down, and I'm sure you all understand that.
Yeah, and we really weren't going to because we can't afford to until we get to that goal. But so we're hoping you'll get us there, and we frankly expect that you will. You guys have been awesome so far. We've been grateful for everything you've done. The stuff that you've, the help you've given us has enabled us to make some big improvements to the show, behind the scenes things like, production and post-production, but as well as our big move to weekly episodes. So thank you. And, to make it worth your while for folks who are still thinking about it, we have some really fun rewards too, like exclusive content.
Like our postscripts to each episode. They usually come up a couple of times in the regular episodes.
Yeah, we do.
What those are is after we record each episode, we listen to it before it releases just to see if we left out any pearls of wisdom or nuggets of comedy gold, or occasionally if we just botched something in a really spectacular way.
It does happen.
We put those into a 10 or so minute postscript that's available to our Patreon supporters.
That's right. And that exclusive postscript usually releases the same day as the episode that it follows. So if you want access to that bonus plus all sorts of other extras, be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast. And again, thanks to those of you who've already joined. You really are helping to make the show better. And we want to give our very special shout-out to D. May in Alaska and James in Virginia. They are our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier. Now, if you want a personalized shout-out on our episodes, well, now you know where to go.
And while we truly do appreciate your support, we don't want you to feel obligated. We only want you to consider signing up for the Fellowship of the Podcast if you can afford it, and only if you think we've earned it.
That's right.
If you can't, or if you choose to support us in other ways, that's great. We're still very grateful for that. So even if you can't join us at Patreon, please keep enjoying the podcast, keep sharing it, tell your friends.
Please.
We'll keep making it.
Absolutely. We certainly will. Shawn, why don't we go ahead and get on with Bartleman's bag?
Okay. Well, first up, I've got a quick bit of word nerdery.
Of course
in
you
episodes, do. Of course. Like we haven't had enough this episode already.
I know.
In episode 70, I mentioned that the word Atterkop has cognates in other Germanic languages. Mm-hmm. And I thought that at least one Scandinavian language used a similar word as their common term for spider. Well, it turned out I was right, or at least Google was right when it told me that. Listener Benjamin A. from Norway confirmed for us that Edderkopp is Norwegian for spider.
Ah, well, thank you, Benjamin. And folks, if you haven't checked out our Facebook page with links to Benjamin's incredible typographic art, you should go do that. He shared some with us recently, and we posted it along with some links to his work. It is phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, really, really incredible stuff. Also on that note, Stefan from the Netherlands wrote in to tell us that Etterkop, with two T's, Etterkop, is a usually joking, insulting name in Dutch to call someone who's being annoying. Stefan says it literally means puss head.
Ew. That's gross.
Yeah, I know. I know.
That's disgusting.
It's awful. I know.
It's like calling somebody a zit, I mean, that's just not nice.
Yeah, it really is. He says it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the modern Dutch word for spider, which is spin. But the word does appear in some Dutch translations of The Hobbit, and he and I were going back and forth on this a little bit earlier today, in fact. And it does seem like it is related to Atterkop. So
yeah,
it somehow shares that history.
Well, if I remember correctly, there's the poison. Maybe that's linked. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because we said that it means something like poison head or poison spider.
Poison head.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So poison and those words for poison and pus could be related.
Yeah, they could be. Well, now we know why those Mirkwood spiders lost their wits. They must have understood Dutch.
Yeah, no kidding. Who are you calling pusshead?
Ew.
So, yeah. But thank you, Stefan, for those. And now, after those little bits of word nerdery, I'll get on to our first question. Mm-hmm. So by now we've learned that hobbits are not the greatest whitewater rafters in Middle-earth. We'll soon find out that dwarves aren't exactly made for it either.
No Olympic medals in kayaking?
No, not quite. There's actually one other group that I can think of that had very bad luck with a river, and that's the ringwraiths.
Ah, yes.
A few months ago, Tanya P. in New York wrote to us to say she was rereading Lord of the Rings, and she recently got through Frodo's passing the fort of Bruinen, where the Black Riders were swept away by the flood. Next thing we know, Gandalf is explaining what happened there, and he says, Elrond commanded it, speaking of the flood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gandalf says the river of this valley is under his power, and it will rise in anger when he has great need to bar the ford.
Yep.
This made Tanya wonder where Elrond's power over the river derived from. She said Elrond is not a Maya to exert direct control over the substance of Arda. He's Eärendil's son, but I don't recall that Eärendil or his father Tuor, who spoke with Ulmo and was in that Vala's favor, don't remember that he had any special power over water. In fact, on his first attempts to reach Valinor, Eärendil was defeated by the sea.
True.
So, what gives there? She says, or could it be that Elrond's ring grants him control over surrounding country? But then again, his is the ring of air, not water. Nor does the power to command floods sound like a power of stopping the effects of the flow of time, which we usually associate with the elven rings. So,
wow.
Great observations there, and I'm going to let you answer this one.
Oh, thanks, Shawn. Really appreciate that.
You're very welcome, my friend.
The first place we would turn to with a question like this would be the history of Middle-earth to see if anything in Tolkien's early drafts or maybe Christopher's notes would illuminate this. But, unfortunately, there's just really not anything to go on there. And that's not a surprise. I mean, if there was, Tanya wouldn't have asked that question. She'd already know the answer because she knows history of Middle-earth.
That is a very good point. Because
better
she knows
than you and I combined.
Yeah, exactly.
All we get in The Return of the Shadow, which is the 6th volume, is that in an early draft, it wasn't Elrond, but Gandalf who commanded the flood. Now, that doesn't help us much because Gandalf does make it clear in the finished version that it was Elrond. So we have to speculate. which is something we do, and we try to do it well.
Yeah.
It's not outside the realm of possibility that Ulmo granted some kind of special boon to the sons of Eärendil. We certainly know that Elrost's descendants were great mariners, but there's really nothing in the text to say that's the case.
Yeah, that's true, and I agree with Tanya that this doesn't seem to be anything to do with the Elven Ring's chief power of preservation. But I do notice that in letter 131, Tolkien says that is just the chief power of the rings is the prevention or slowing of decay. But he also says that they enhance the natural powers of a possessor, thus approaching magic, a motive easily corruptible into evil, a lust for domination. And finally, they had other powers, he goes on to say, which includes like invisibility in the case of the One Ring. So they did have some other powers besides just stopping the flow of time, and I want to focus on that enhancing the natural powers of a possessor approaching magic. In our last episode, I think it was our last episode, we talked briefly about the word magic and Tolkien's views on it in one of his letters, letter 155. In that letter, I don't think we have the time to go into it in a ton of detail, but Tolkien basically talks about magic in two categories.
Right.
Goetia, which could mean either necromancy or it could mean like charms and beguilements.
Which is what Tolkien meant, right.
Which is how Tolkien means it, except when he's talking about Sauron in that letter.
Right.
And then there's magia, which looks like magia, but I'm pretty sure it's magia, which is a way of producing real effects in the physical world.
Okay.
Tolkien speaks of both elves and Gandalf having magia and using that for specific beneficent purposes, with a motive of immediacy, speed, reduction of labor, and reduction also to a minimum or vanishing point of the gap between the idea or desire and the result or effect. So I'll break that down a little bit. Basically, Tolkien gives the example of using magia to start a fire from wet wood. If you want it to happen, you can reduce the gap between
the
wanting it to
idea
happen
of
and actually making it happen.
And the results of the fire. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, sort of making things happen just by willing it.
Okay.
And Tolkien says that Gandalf and elves and Sauron all have a way of doing this with their magia, and that's basically what we would call magic.
Sure.
Notably, unlike what we usually call magic, it's not something that you can learn. You can't get a spell book or something and study some spells and learn how to use this. It's an inherent power natural to elves, as well as to Maiar, like Gandalf and Sauron. Some are probably stronger than others, which I think brings me back to the quote about the rings enhancing the natural powers of the possessor.
Okay, yeah.
I think where I'm going with this is the only explanation that I can see is maybe Elrond has a natural magia over the substance of Arda because he's an elf, and he's a powerful elf at that, even though he's only a half-elf. But he's also got the ring, which enhances his natural magia, and somehow that combination allows him to command the river Bruin and to rise up. I know that doesn't seem like, the Ring of Air would have a water-based elemental power, but I mean, that's just the only explanation I can see for it. It's a natural enhancement. In Tolkien's words, that's the only explanation that I can see.
Well, I think that's the right direction to head in. I mean, it's less a matter of elemental magic and more about the power of his ring to protect and preserve. In this case, because of where they are, that is, it's the river that protects their location. It's the river that can be manipulated to serve that purpose.
That's an interesting thought.
I don't think you could use his magia to raise the, some other river. Maybe,
right.
I mean,
but because he's protecting
the Anduin, for instance.
Right, that makes sense. But because he's protecting his realm,
that's what
and
I'm
preserving
thinking.
his realm against this evil intrusion by the ring wraiths.
If we want to think about it from maybe a mechanical perspective, you could argue that if he does have the ability to stop time, all you would need to do is stop time on the river for like 5 seconds, let the water build up, and then let time go, and then you've got instant flood.
That's an interesting thought too. Yeah.
That just kind of came to my mind. Like, well, really, how would you make a flood happen? You can't. Even with magia, you're probably not going to generate more water out of nothing. You're going to stop up the waters for a little bit, and then you're going to let them go, and it's going to create a flood. So, I don't know.
That's an interesting thought about the mechanics behind it.
Yeah, and that may be an option. But let's turn our attention to another question that requires some speculation, since we're on that sort of speculation kick right now. Elrond's dad and grandparents. Now, both Brandon A. in Connecticut and Jessica F., and sorry, Jessica, I'm not sure where you're from. I think the question came to us on Facebook, asked about the fate of Tuor and Idril. Now, remember, in Chapter 23 of the Silmarillion, we hear, Tuor felt old age creep upon him, and ever a longing for the deeps of the sea grew stronger in his heart. Therefore he built a great ship, and he named it Eärame, which is Sea Wing, And with Idril Celebrimbor he set sail into the sunset and the west, and came no more into any tale or song. But in after days it was sung that Tuor alone of mortal men was numbered among the elder race, and was joined with the Noldor whom he loved, and his fate is sundered from the fate of men. It was sung, but nobody knows for sure what happened to them. And we love that, right? There's so many, it was sung, it was said.
There's quite a few of those, yeah.
And I love every one of them is beautiful because it's more of those textual ruins. It's the myth of even in the story, we're getting a myth about what may have happened to somebody.
Well, and we talked a couple of episodes ago about how that kind of thing forces us to get comfortable with some mysteries.
Yeah, with not knowing.
That's a cool thing. Yeah.
So years later, their son Eärendil took to the sea himself looking for his parents, and he never found them. Many years later, when his later voyages eventually took him to Valinor, we find out there's no mention of him running into his mom and dad.
True.
He is called the first of living men to land there, which strongly implies that Tuor didn't make it. And then there's also this. He was counted among the Noldor in this song, that it was sung that. And the doom of the Noldor forbade even the Noldor from returning, suggesting that Idril wouldn't have even been allowed back, and that certainly if Tuor was counted among them, he wouldn't have been allowed either. So
even if you want to say Tuor was already numbered among the Noldor, he still shouldn't have gotten
right, because the Noldor can't come back.
Yeah,
he's fallen under the doom, even though he wasn't part of it. So what gives? Did Tuor and Idril get lost at sea, or did they actually make it to Valinor as it was sung?
Well, as you can probably guess, because of the characters involved, I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this one.
I'm not surprised.
No, of course not. This is highly speculative, of course, and I will probably get some mail about this. But I think Tuor did get counted among the elves.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have anything from the books to back me up? No. But I do have, there's a 1954 letter number 153, in which Tolkien says, Tuor weds Idril, and it is supposed, not stated, that he is, as an unique exception, receives the Elvish limited immortality, meaning, of course, the serial longevity, not true immortality. Mm-hmm. Tolkien goes on at length about the fact that the Valar themselves did not have the power to make an exception like this, and then he later says in the letter that the cases of Luthien and Tuor and their descendants was a direct act of God.
That's right.
And then we get to one of my favorite quotes about the entering into men of the elven strain is indeed represented as part of a divine plan for the ennoblement of the human race.
We've read that half a dozen times or more.
Many, many times. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Really, it's a central quote to the concept, yeah.
It is totally central to the concept of elves and men and their relationship to one another.
Right.
I've spent quite a bit of time on that. The fact that Tolkien mentions Tuor alongside Luthien not once but twice in that letter tells me that he believes Tuor was granted the exception, even though it's only rumored in the text itself.
I would certainly concur.
That's kind of, I mean, the only other evidence I have is there's the 1930 version of the Quenta that's published in The Shaping of Middle-earth. There's a version of the text that's similar to the final Silmarillion, but it's a little bit different. It says, but Tuor alone of mortal men was numbered among the elder race, and joined with the Noldor whom he loved, and in aftertime dwelt still. I don't even have to go on, because it says he was numbered among the elder race. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, I feel like that, at least at that point, he was pretty convinced that Tuor was numbered among the elves.
Wow. So at one time, he was more decisive that Tuor became counted among the elves. Mm-hmm. I mean, he did dial it back from being clear to being vague. That doesn't mean he couldn't have changed his mind later on, but it certainly does line up well with those comments in that letter.
It's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, now that's just to say that he was counted among the elves. I mean,
right.
As for whether they actually made it to Valinor, that is really uncertain.
Yeah.
I went back into some of the old versions for that too. Even as far back as the Book of Lost Tales, Eärendil never finds his parents in Valinor. There's no version of that story that has Eärendil meeting his parents.
Yeah.
There's actually a handwritten note in the earliest version, and I think this is back in the Book of Lost Tales, Volume 2. Mm-hmm. When Eärendil comes to Mandos, he finds that Tuor is not in Valinor, nor Erumani, which was his human underworld at the time.
Right.
And neither elves nor Ainu know where he is. And then, in parentheses, Tolkien wrote, he is with Ulmo.
Oh, wow.
So that seems to agree with the Quenta quote earlier, that he is ever upon his ship voyaging. Oh, I didn't read this part. It says he's ever upon his ship voyaging the sea. I had more of the quote. I just didn't read it for the sake of time. But it does say that he is ever upon his ship voyaging the seas of Fairyland.
Wow.
So to me, I feel like it's very likely that Tuor was counted among the elves, but they never came to Valinor. They're just Tuor and
Stuck out
Idril
on
are
the
alive
ocean.
out there on the ocean somewhere, enjoying a nice prolonged elvish retirement.
Well, so it's more like a Carnival cruise line than, let's say, Flying Dutchman, who has to just stay on the water forever.
Right. Yes. That makes it sound slightly less fun.
I
but
know,
I
that's
guess
kinda what I'm thinking.
if you're an elf and you have serial longevity anyway, I guess
Part
you
of
might
the
as well be
ship,
with
part
the
of
one
the
you love on a
crew.
boat.
Part of the ship,
Right.
part of the crew. Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness.
I mean, and it is true that, Eärendil sailed the seas. He never came across them. But, I mean, the sea's a big place.
yeah, I was
mean,
going to say, talk about a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there was one more thing in Jessica's version of that question. She also wondered as to why, when Eärendil and Elwing were given a choice by Manwë whether to live the life of elves or of men, why Eärendil originally wanted to be counted among men. The text says, his heart was rather with the kindred of men and the people of his father. And it was only because Elwing wanted to be an elf that he chose the same thing to be with her. Jessica says, Eärendil was born in Gondolin among elves, and then fled with them all the way to the mouth of Sirion, where he was again among elves. In fact, we don't see Eärendil come across men at all. Elves were more his father's people than the House of Hador ever had been. I can't make heads or tails of why Eärendil would feel this way. Everything in the text indicates he should rather feel more connected to the elves. So what say you, Shawn,
Good
our
point.
resident Eärendil obsessive?
Believe it or not, I don't really have a good answer for this question. I mean, speculating, obviously.
Yeah, of course, all of this is.
And this is more like psychoanalysis than true speculation. I mean, maybe it had more to do with his knowledge of the history of the House of Hador and the other Edain.
Maybe.
Just knowing all the things that his Manish ancestors had done, as opposed to a personal connection with any men. Because it's true, he really didn't know many men that we know of.
You're right.
Or maybe he knew that, through everything that happened, his father Tuor was still a man, at least when he left. And, maybe he just felt like his father represented the best kind of man that a man can be. I don't really know. I think nobody knows but Eärendil.
Yeah.
But I think whatever the reason, I think his Manish heritage was just somehow key to Eärendil's sense of identity. And I don't know why, but I think what's truly significant about the story is the fact that he had this feeling about his heritage, but he sacrificed that identity to be with his wife.
I totally agree.
That's what I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I concur entirely. I mean, to me, if a man has a father worth looking up to, he wants to be like his father. In fact, I might suggest that it is precisely because Eärendil was born amongst elves, fled with elves, and lived among elven refugees that his heart was rather with the kindred of men. He probably felt like he'd missed out on something special, on the part of his nature that belonged to the world of men. And had the choice been up to him, that's where he'd have gone. But like all good husbands in Middle-earth, and in real Earth, I should add, he gave up his desires in order to give his wife what she wanted. Very typical of Tolkien to write it that way.
A very nice compromise, and just to be together. They want to be together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tanya, Brandon, and Jessica. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Still don't leave, not quite yet, just wait for the music. As always, we thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us again next time when we cover Chapter 10 of The Hobbit, all of it.
And we finally come to Lake Town.
Yeah.
Get our first sight of a real-life Manish city. Bilbo is so out of sorts that he forgets his own birthday.
Thank you very much. Folks, we want to encourage you all to read along and take notes in your copy of The Hobbit. So please check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got links to everything from inexpensive paperbacks to the really good stuff for your Tolkien shelf.
And in the meantime, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd be very grateful for that. Those reviews help us get more visibility in iTunes, and that just helps more people find us. Grows our community of Tolkien lovers.
Absolutely. Thanks to those of you who have. We do read every single one of them, and we do appreciate all the nice things you say about us.
In fact, we've now started picking out one special review every week to feature on our social media networks as a way of saying thank you on our Thankful Thursday posts. So if you'd like to see your name or your alias in lights on our pages, now it's easy. All you have to do is leave us a review. And make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to the podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in just about any podcast directory, including Spotify now.
That's right. And we're also on Potable. Potable is a podcast discovery platform that finds new and emerging creators and recommends them to you, sort of like Netflix does with their algorithms. Other apps will make you sort through the clunky charts and things to find your favorite podcasts. But Potable learns your interests and recommends new individual episodes as well as shows, both popular and undiscovered. So you can spend less time searching and more time listening.
And we want to thank all of you who have become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everyone could join, which is why we have the Common Room on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast, and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and also Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
That is right. Well, one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or photos from your last barrel rafting vacation to Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com. That's Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com, and we'll try to get him into our next episode. Well, an hour 40, still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
farewell, friends.